Today we're going to look at how to satisfy real market needs. And again, it starts by doing research and understanding some of those needs. Once you have a bit of a handle on what some of the needs and wants are in a market, we can then step forward and think about a few critical considerations. And this is a short list to get you thinking about this scope. One is certainly a question of why would customers need my product? And that comes with some understanding of what do they do today? Either what products do they use to serve that need, or do they self-serve in some way? But we want to understand why customers need our product. We also want to understand what's the best way to assess that need. Do we want to do surveys? Do we want to do interviews? Do we want to do focus groups? Do we want to talk with friends and family? Do we want to interview experts in the area? So again, all of those begin to give us some insights into, based on the need that I think is there for the target customer that I have, how is it that I'm going to go through and assess that, and what are my evaluation criteria? There are naturally questions of size and weight and durability and these other performance features that we think about as well. Particularly for engineers, we tend to over-design things. We'll develop something that perhaps is very well suited for the need, but it might be too expensive. It might not necessarily do what we needed to do at the price point that the customer is willing to pay. So we'll give some consideration on how to look at features as well. We also want to think about how we compare not only to current competitors, but future competitors. And we want to recognize that your competitors aren't going to stand still, that it might take 6 months, it might take a year to get your product into market, and you've got to think about what are the competing products going to be then, more so than what are the competing products now. Price is also something that's very important. And often as an entrepreneurial team, we have but one shot at getting the price right. If the price is not right in the beginning, we may not be able to sell our product, we may not be able to demonstrate to investors that we have a viable concept, and the idea may die early on because of incorrect pricing. So it's not something that's to be done carelessly or arbitrarily, but we'll think about how to look at pricing and what are some models to try and price things appropriately. So there is certainly the question of, you might have a need in mind. You might have a solution in mind, but there, particularly if you're a for-profit venture, is the question of, is it affordable? Is it something that I can design? And again, be careful not to over-design. It's easy to have a long list of features. It's easy to want to be everything, but rarely is it necessarily economically feasible to do that. And so there's a question of, how do I keep my costs down? What are your other costs? If we go to a retailer, again, the product on the shelf, the production cost may have only been 5 or 10% of what the price is for us. Does that mean the retailer is making a 900% profit margin? No. For most retailers, if they make a 20% profit margin, that's pretty good. So for a $10 item, if it costs them $8 to bring that to you, and only $1 of that 8 is in production, where's the other $7? There's a shipping cost.
Advertising.
There's an advertising and marketing cost. Advertising and marketing alone might involve 30%, maybe 40% of the price on the back end. So advertising and marketing, expensive and often underestimated when you're thinking about business plans and models. What else?
If the retailer has a sale, then that makes the price a little lower.
There's an element of recognizing that pricing may change and vary, and even if we put something on sale, we don't necessarily want to lose money on it. So we leave ourselves some room to do some sales. Where else do companies spend money? What's arguably their biggest expense? Labor. So just because the material cost of producing something is low, there's still labor involved in doing it. So again, all of those elements are things to think about when you're doing your pricing and when you're thinking about feasibility. And you want to make sure that you can sell enough of them that it's a profitable endeavor so that the volumes make sense. So as you're looking at these things and as you're thinking about these things, it's important to be honest about how you fare versus the competition and what's happening now and what's going on in the future. Being aware of this element of over-optimism that we've talked about before, and recognizing that the rest of the industry isn't going to stand still. if we recognize Tesla's having some success and their sales are spiking and their stock price is climbing, who else is recognizing that? Their rival car companies. And for the most part, every car company is bringing an electric product to market. What's Tesla do then when you have a BMW i8 that performs well as an all-electric? Yep.
They try and make their product better. They add something different from BMW. That
There's an element of they can't sit still. They need to continue to innovate, continue to develop new product, and enhance what it is that they're doing. And again, it'll be interesting to see in the next couple of years how that evolves. They have, in large part, been the first successful electric vehicle. How long have electric vehicles been around? 70s?
70s? You really?
Somebody said 70s.
Early 1900s?
Early 1900s. The electric vehicle, the combustion-powered vehicle, and the steam engine-based vehicle all were produced at the same time. Early 1900s. Taken 100 years to figure out how to do it successfully. What do you think the problem's been?
Holding on to enough energy to make it like usable to.
The energy and the aspect of battery. The ability to make an electric vehicle has been around for 100 years. The ability to have a battery that can last has been the technical challenge. So in that way, again, recognizing what are the strengths, what are the weaknesses of our solution versus competitor solutions now and in the future, and not only are what we going to do, but what's our competitor going to do. And it's the difference of thinking about checkers and chess. What do I mean by that? What do you have to do if you're going to play chess instead of checkers? It's an element of opponents and thinking about, well, what am I going to do? What are they going to do? Then what am I going to do? Then what are they going to do? So again, it's thinking that several steps ahead. Relationships can certainly help with that. And again, this is another value of social networks, of getting a sense of what's happening in the market, how are things evolving, what are competitors doing, getting a feel for, through your relationships, how might markets evolve. And if you want to talk with someone at a company, if you want to talk with someone that's an expert in an area, it's helpful if you know them, or it's helpful if you find someone who knows them. And that's where, again, I think I've mentioned LinkedIn before, and there are other platforms that are helpful in trying to form and find and make these connections. Also important to understand kind of the role of sales and marketing in all of this, and that the best marketed products often win. A company that some people would argue don't need to spend a lot of money on marketing. That who doesn't know about Apple? Who hasn't heard of Apple? Why are they spending hundreds of millions to billions on marketing?
Well, I mean, everyone knows about Apple, but if they don't spend on marketing, then how would we know when a new product is launched?
You might know the brand, but you still want to know about the new products. Why else do they spend such sizable sums on marketing?
You want to ever like you don't want to be like a trend that dies out. You want to keep it like.
You want to keep things moving. Why else do they spend so much on marketing?
With phones like the GS3 coming out that are really good competitors, you want to keep.
One answer is because your competitors are. So if your competitors are strong and they're spending on marketing and you don't, you're going to lose a lot of sales.
You want to like build the anticipation for whatever you're launching. That way, lots of people know about it.
You want to, again, build that anticipation and that awareness. So if Apple, a brand we know, needs to invest a lot in marketing, it would suggest that if we're going to start a company that's unknown, you need to invest a lot more in marketing than a lot of people typically do. And with that, there's also an element of personal selling. So for one of the examples that we'd had previously of you're trying to sell a product to a university, and it's a product that might be a few $1,000s, it's going to take some element of personal selling. What is that? What's personal selling?
You personally go out and like advertise and sell your products to people instead of distributing like.
It's an element of where you as an individual, and in the early days, you as the founders are going and meeting with prospective clients and talking and presenting and trying to sell them directly. Why do you do that?
Build better relationships.
You want to build some relationships with these people. And if you have a relatively expensive item, you could mail a postcard to the University of Maryland and say, hey, here's a great product. Contact us if you'd like to buy it. Good luck getting contacted. So in that way, again, some things based on the nature of the product or the price point take some personal selling to get it done. And or in the beginning. So people know Diesel jeans, Diesel apparel. So in that way, the founder of Diesel manufactured, I think, something like 12 pair and started going in apparel shops in, I think it was LA, and just wanted to put them on the shelf on a consignment basis. Let us put a few of these in your store and let's see if they sell. And if they sell, you and I share the revenue. If they don't sell, I'll come back in a few days, pick them up, and I'll be on my way. They didn't sell. What does he do then?
Maybe go to another city.
Okay, you could go to a different city. So he doesn't leave town.
Improve on it.
He didn't change the product. He thought the product was great. What would you do?
Maybe instead of just putting it on shelves, maybe advertising it a little bit more than it already is.
What do you mean advertising it more? He doesn't have any advertising money.
Well,
What do you know about retail stores, retail apparel stores, and what people wear who work in the store?
Oh. He would wear them to show them off and try. Or
Well, he didn't work in the store.
he would give them to the employees.
He would giving them to the employees that worked in the store to wear while they were at work. So in that way, you have a model, essentially, of your product in the store, and then it began to sell. And now they're this global apparel brand. But it started with, again, recognizing in the beginning, I need to go into these stores, I need to make the pitch, I need to be the salesperson. And even the first thing I thought of, let's just put them on the shelf and see if they sell, didn't work. Well, I'm going to give some to the employees, let them wear them and see how that does. And I think that when people see them, they'll like them. But it's difficult for people to sort things out when you're folded up and you're one of 1,000 products in a store. But if it's something people wear, maybe that will get people over the hump. So again, that's what we mean by personal selling. And again, pricing plays a role in that. What do Diesel jeans cost?
$130.
Oh, they were cheaper.
You're in 100, 120, 150. Who's he competing against?
Lucky, Brody.
True Religion, Lucky, and these other premium brands. So in that way, again, if they were $20, would he compete well against the other premium brands? No. Because again, we equate price with quality. If they were $400, would he compete well against Lucky and True Religion? Perhaps not. Who would he compete against? Can you spend $400 on a pair of jeans? It's been done. There are D&G, and a couple of others that do. But that's a rare and hyper-competitive market. So you want to think about where you fit and what makes sense. And pricing certainly plays a role in that. And you want to be able to get a good sense early on of not just production, but all the elements of design and distribution and marketing, and how does that play a role. And recognize, again, you have fixed cost, you have variable cost. Some costs, like labor, if they're your employees, are going to be fixed. Some costs, like a retail store, rent, lease, are going to be fixed. Other things are going to be variable based on, if I have an employee that's hourly, I can change that when I'm paying based on how many hours I schedule them. If I have material cost, if I have inventory or ingredient cost, that's going to change based on how much product that I sell or produce. So there are other elements that you might be able to adapt or modify as the business grows over time to make it more scalable. What we did when we hopped online and looked at the financials on finance.yahoo or finance.google, you can do for any public firm in the U.S. So you can go in and you can see what were the revenues and in big buckets, what were the expenses with any public company. Now, you don't see it at the granular level. I cannot see what a Starbucks in College Park spent on their ingredients in January, but I can see what the cost of goods sold for all Starbucks were in January, February, and March of this year. And then you begin having to do some math of trying to figure out, well, how many stores, what time periods am I interested in? But it gives you a starting point of being able to collect some data. What about private firms? Meaning that if there's a local coffee shop and I want to know what their sales were last month, how do I find that out?
You can go to them.
You can go to them and ask them. They may tell you, they may not tell you. They may want to know, why do you want to know? So you can't go on and find information about private companies with any ease, but for public companies, public meaning that their stock is for sale in a public market, you can at least begin to capture data that is in these big buckets, and it gives you something to work with. You also cannot go online and see revenues for a given store. So maybe you want to open an apparel store. You can't go on and see what did the Macy's in downtown Atlanta sell this year. You can look at averages, you can get estimations, you can go to the store and try and find somebody that will tell you. But it gets to be a bit tricky, again, to try and drill down on that. Also, from a pricing standpoint, as we've talked about before, beware of underpricing. You want to make sure that your estimates are close and that you think you're going to sell the volume that you need to sell. This is particularly important when you're looking at perishable items. What do I mean by perishable?
Food that goes bad.
Food is a good example. So in that way, my family operates a couple of restaurants. It's a big deal if you overorder food. Is it a big deal if you overorder T-shirts? Not as big of a deal. Of course, you'd rather sell them than not sell them, but you can still do something with them later. Food spoils, food goes in the trash. Really no recovery value of it. What happens if you don't order enough?
There might be a larger demand on it.
So what happens for the restaurant? It's a shortage. Welcome to our restaurant. We're out of chicken, we're out of beef, and we're out of fish. What would you like to order? Not something that you want to have to say. That chicken you're going to sell for $12, it may have only cost you $2 to buy. So you're also always kind of doing the math of, well, what's the right number, knowing that I would rather throw away a little bit than not be able to sell And it gets to be real tricky in a perishable business. In a bigger business that's not perishable, there's also the question again of you don't want to spend money that you're not going to be able to recover. But that's why it's important, again, to do good estimates and to get a feel for what you think the market will bear. Also, competing products in some way are going to govern your price points. So I mentioned before you had this sling box that was $300, and then you had this Volcano offering that was very similar. You had the Volcano offering that was very similar, and in that sense, the Volcano offering was $100. Why? Why did the second-to-market product price themselves at $100 when the incumbent was at $300?
If you go to the store and you see two products that relatively do the same thing, you're always going to go with the cheap one.
Okay, so they thought that we're a comparable product, so let's price ours at $100 instead of $300, and we'll capture those consumers. What's the fault with what they did?
There's a huge difference between.
That's a big difference from $300 to $100
You could easily sell.
for two brands that I might not necessarily differentiate. It's not a $300 Rolls Royce to a $100 Camry. It's an A brand and a A brand. And I'm not real acquainted with either. And price might guide me a little bit, but I could have probably priced it at $240, $260, $270, and that might have been enough of a tiebreaker for folks that were of that mindset. So again, be careful not to underprice. What it might also suggest, again, is lower quality or lower value. So in summary, we've looked at a variety of different examples of how entrepreneurial teams and a few big firms as well have gone through to think about customers' needs and wants and how to assess them, to think about the features and the functions that make sense, as well as what's going on in the market and being able to think about the future, and then lastly about pricing and what you can do with pricing. And we'll talk about pricing a bit later as well, and in that way it begins to help you connect and really begin to understand what customers need and want and what they're willing to pay.